everybody. Welcome back to another exciting I can't even say it, it's so exciting. Another exciting episode of Zinespiration. Today we are talking with Maira from Lngrmstplr. You've heard the podcast, you've read some of their zines, but before we dive into that, Craig, what have you been up to?
I've been working on my own zine. I've just recently put out issue number 2 of 5 o'clock in Tokyo, and working on number 3 slowly. Um, after number 1 was just me, but issue 2 I got some contributors, some local Tokyo people to contribute, and I'm hoping to continue that and add a new page every issue. Four pages, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Cool.
And you?
Cool. Well, the Pocket Thoughts train keeps rolling along. The new annual, Pocket Thoughts Annual number 4, just came out. Features pages by both of you actually are in here. So this is almost like a reunion episode. We're all hanging out. And as usual, the Pocket Thoughts zines you can get at pocketthoughts.etsy.com. And your support helps to keep food on my table. Okay, so Maira makes these great Zine of the Hill zines, and I've got the karaoke one as well that's really cool. Curtin was, where did Dog Tinder go? And Dog Tinder was a lot of fun too. Maira, I know you're working on Zine of the Hill number 3. That's the queer edition, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to do an all-queer King of the Hill fanzine. It's slow going, but it's in process.
So when you say it's slow going, because I know you've been asking for submissions for it, do you find that it's just like no one's submitting, or you're not really digging the stuff that's coming in?
I'm not getting that many submissions. I kind of notoriously hate marketing myself and marketing my work, which is fabulous for a self-employed artist. But yeah, I'm not getting that many submissions. I've extended the deadline like 3 times now. So instead of, a couple days ago, I decided, like, instead of having like a really rigid like call for submissions, I'm just gonna kind of accept them as they come, because I don't want to force it. I want this to be like a really special zine.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand what you mean. Like, if you put the creators under pressure, they're like, "Oh, I've got like 2 weeks to quickly come up with something." But like, if you, and that's actually why I don't really put my hand up for submissions, because I'm always like, "Oh, I'm going to be under pressure then, and maybe I can't create in that time because I'm really slow." So yeah, I kind of understand. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what that's about then? Like because I'm aware of King of the Hill, and then how is it kind of the queer, and how does it all go together?
Well, I have a copy as well. So I'm queer. And when I first watched King of the Hill, it was on when I was a kid, but I didn't like really watch it until college, when I was kind of figuring out my like gender identity and sexuality. And I noticed a lot of like, maybe not a lot, I noticed some queer subtext where maybe it wasn't supposed to be, or it wasn't like necessarily like put there, but it just kind of was there. Or like I identified with certain scenes and I was like, oh, that's definitely queer. I mean, there's obviously like Dale's dad is in the gay rodeo, and Bobby's kind of ambiguous, but I noticed that a lot of my queer friends also really love King of the Hill. And so I was like, oh, there's so much crossover. I'm going to do it's like a really, on this week's special episode, I want to do a really special compilation zine where it's just all queer like feelings about the show. Because that's what I focused on in the second one, was like how the show made people feel. The first one I don't have a copy of, but it was more like art that I found on the internet and some writing that I did. That one was me kind of seeking people out. But then I did a call for submissions for the second one, and I got a lot of really good stuff. But I was like, what if I made one that's like really gay? That was my whole thought process.
That's a cool touch to spin on it though, because there's so many just like basic fanzines out there, right? Like, you know, why I love this, or you know, why I love that. But to put that queer spin on it really kind of takes it to a different level, right?
Yeah. And I've had this thought for a while where like all of my zines are kind of technically per zines. All of my zines are technically queer zines because I'm queer and I'm making the zines. And so I thought, why not just get a gang together? And it's been really cool seeing how people interpret the prompt, which is really open-ended. It was just, are you queer? Do you like King of the Hill? Do you want to send me some art? And so I've gotten a lot of really cool illustrations. I've gotten one piece of writing, and I've got something planned that I have been putting off for my own zine that I will get to eventually when it is ready to be compiled. But yeah, it's been a cool process. I just am not getting like the volume, I guess, that I would need to like put together an entire zine.
It's kind of this is very interesting to me because I'm Australian, and my relationship with King of the Hill is kind of arm's length. You know, I'm aware of the show. I've seen it a little bit. Of course, it was on Australian television. We get kind of everything America has, um, but and I haven't watched it for goodness knows how many years. But I always kind of thought it was more rednecky than what you're kind of describing now. But like I said, I've never watched it. Maybe like you kind of did when you said when you were younger or something like that. So it's such an interesting show, and I think that's why I couldn't connect the two together. Maybe now I'm older and maybe kind of like looking for maybe some kind of like subtext, but kind of like that kind of thing, like below the story a little bit. I would maybe kind of get it a bit more, but it's so interesting. I wouldn't have, because I couldn't really put it together before.
Well, I mean, when it was on when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this show's about people in Texas. That doesn't interest me at all, even if it's a cartoon. But a lot of it is like a satire on kind of redneck culture, and it shows that this family, everyone thinks they're just rednecks, but they're really wholesome, and they go through so many things, and they have I could talk about King of the Hill for this entire thing, but I highly recommend giving the show another shot.
Yeah.
It's very, once you like watch a couple episodes, it's very like, oh, this show is about so much more than I thought it was. It's not some hicks in Texas, or it's not just some hicks in Texas.
Yeah, no.
I wonder though, just to chime in, because I'm in the similar boat of Craig, like, because him and I are the same age. So when King of the Hill started, I mean, I was wrapping up high school pretty much, right? And, you know, it looked like a redneck show to me, and it was on the Fox network. And, you know, like, to look back on it now and see all these, like, queer parallels with it, to go back 20 years when people weren't as open as they are now, right? And there's, you know, a different mindset then versus now. Like, I would have never, ever thought 25 years ago that King of the Hill would have queer undertones to it, right? So I want to go back and watch it too, because I only ever watched maybe the first few episodes that came out. I was like, you know, I like Beavis and Butthead. I should like this, but I'm not into it. But I think it'd be interesting to watch it with today's mindset and pick up on stuff that I wouldn't have gotten back then.
Yeah, I think that's kind of I think that kind of plays on it, right? With us, like our age as well. Like we were kind of. I think we had like different stuff going on in our lives to focus on than where comics and cartoons. To most people, and like when you turn to 20, they kind of take a little step back because it's like, oh shit, now I need to think about maybe university or working or something like that. So I don't know, maybe I think maybe age might have, because I watched everything the Simpsons put out when I was, that was kind of peak, almost kind of peak time for me.
So how then? How do you go from point A to point B? So you like King of the Hill? We're at point B with the King of the Hill zine. What got you into zines? What made you go, oh, I want to do this. I want to make this.
Well, I got into zines in college. Like, I graduated in 2012, so I was very much in like, I guess it's called the aughts, 2010 to 2012. I was on Tumblr all the time, and I got into zines from Tumblr, and that kind of shot off to Etsy. And I was just kind of mining through Etsy looking for zines all the time. But how I got into zines was I have always like written, but I was going through a really weird time in my life. I was kind of figuring out that like, oh, I don't identify as a woman. Like, how do I process this without necessarily going to therapy? Or like, oh, I don't identify as straight. How do I process? It was a lot of like, how can I process what I'm going through? I was dealing with a lot of like mental health stuff. And so I just needed an outlet. And that's where Perzines came in. And it felt like a really natural transition because I used LiveJournal, which I have a zine about. I used LiveJournal pretty extensively from ages like 13 to 22, 23. I just got really into LiveJournal and like journaling, and not necessarily blogging, but because it was always friends only. But yeah, it felt like a very natural transition to just take my thoughts from these little kind of online diary entries into paper form.
Very cool. I think there's a big correlation with zinesters in general, that like we were all blogging at some point in the aughts, you know what I mean? And we were just like, to hell with this, make zines. Way cooler.
Yeah, it felt cool to like have my thoughts kind of printed out and tangible. Because I didn't have, well, okay, I had like diaries before LiveJournal, but I was always so afraid that my parents were going to get into them and read them, and so I stopped. And that's kind of when I transitioned to like specifically online. But it felt really cool to have my thoughts and words in like on paper. I was like, wow, this is kind of like publishing a book, but not really, but it's on my own terms. And I just thought that was really cool and empowering.
So I've heard numerous times that a lot of people got into zines from Tumblr. I was never on Tumblr. How is this? What was going on in Tumblr in the Twitter? Like I still don't own a computer. I haven't owned a computer all my life, so I never really experienced Tumblr in the 2000s. What was happening there?
A lot of it was really cool because it was kind of like Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook kind of all combined, but I think it was pre-Pinterest. And it was a lot of like political theory and feminist theory in more easily digestible formats. There were a lot of memes on Tumblr that kind of explained complicated stuff. One of my favorite Tumblrs was Saved by the Bell Hooks, and it was Bell Hooks quotes and writing over screen caps from Saved by the Bell. And
Sounds right up Ryan's alley.
check it out. It might still be around. I haven't been on Tumblr in a really long time, but
So then there was like people would post about zines on there or something, was it? Was that?
yeah, there were a lot of posts about zines, and it was cool because people would tag their posts, and then you could just click on tags, and it's kind of like how Instagram works now. You could click on tags and just kind of explore. And so I found the Perzine tag and just went wild.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm of the belief that like pretty much all zines are perzines. You know what I mean? Unless you're just copying and pasting information from Wikipedia and putting into a zine and being like, here's a zine about peanut butter, you know? As long as it's coming from a personal perspective and someone is writing their feeling about what's going on, it's a perzine.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because the other day I made a zine about, like a mini zine about the song Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus, and all I did was copy the Wikipedia article, but I like cut and pasted it, but I wrote a little bit about like my personal connection to the song, and I was like, oh, this is definitely a perzine, even though it is very obviously just ripped from Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia.
That song seems to be getting a bit of a revival. Every now and again, I'll see it up on YouTube, like reaction to Teenage Dirtbag or something like that. I'm like, what?
Well, every so many years, there's new Teenage Dirtbags, so it just has to keep coming around. So your zines then, before you got into zines, what zines did you see on Tumblr and that like, what zinesters inspired you to make you go, damn, I want to do that too?
I feel like I should know this. It's been a very long time. But one of the first zines I ever like had was Learning Good Consent. I think her name is Cindy Crabb. That could be totally wrong, but that was kind of the first zine I ever like owned. And it was cool because you could print it yourself. And that really inspired me to get a printer and start printing myself. But my friends made zines in college, and that was really the like, oh, I can do this too moment for me. Was that guy's doing it, that guy's doing it. I had a friend who like did an art show on campus and printed out zines as like a program for his show, and that was such a pivotal moment for me in kind of figuring out that I could do this. Did that answer your question?
Cool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
And this is slightly a little bit of a turn, but do you have much connection with zine fairs or anything like that? Have you been to any of them? Cool.
Yes, I do. I organized 2 of them. I tabled my first Zine Fest in 2014 at the East Bay Alternative Book and Zine Fest in Oakland.
Wow.
It was so special, and it's one of my favorite Zine Fests. And then in 2016, I started organizing that fest. So this was my 5th year, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 20. 6th year. I can count. 6th year organizing eBabes. Thank you. And I'm stopping after last year. It's always in December. I'm stepping back from it. But in 2017, I also founded the Bay Area Queer Zine Fest, and I continue to organize that one. We're gearing up for our 5th year. So yes, I have a deep connection with zine fairs.
That to me is kind of an ultimate zine fest that I'd like to go to, because like my first introduction to zines was through Comet Bus, and that's, you know, he's from your area basically. So that for me would be my zine that I make is basically me trying to rip off Comet Bus every single issue. Like that's I know maybe that has a stigma around, but yeah, that's yeah, that would be a cool fest to go to. I think.
It's got a very special place in my heart, and I love organizing it. It gets bigger and bigger every year. It's been weird organizing online, I think, and that's kind of why I like felt like I wanted to take a break. But it's such a special fest to me. I got the flyer tattooed on my leg the year that I started organizing.
So Maira, why don't you like give us a little walkthrough then of some of your process? Like, so how do you make your zines?
Well, for a long time, I made them in Microsoft Word, and when I first started making zines, I started making them in Microsoft Word. Do I have any examples? No, I lost all of my old zines in a house fire. But yeah, I lost all my master copies of all my like really old per zines, but I have an example, Manic Spring, of a zine I made in pre-2015. And so what I would do is I would like scanned like a background, like a piece of fabric, and then I would write on pieces of paper, cut those, put them on the piece of fabric, scan. It was a really complicated process that I think I have streamlined since then. But I use Publisher now sometimes if I'm not doing cut and paste. Like Karaoke Zine 2 was made in Publisher. And it looks a little nicer than my cut and paste zines. But I've been really into cut and paste lately. And also making mini zines. I have made like 3 in the last week because I love I just love folding all the paper. I love this shit. And I like doing fun colors of paper. I just organized my office and my paper stash is like out of control. So I'm trying to like burn through it, and that's why I ended up with the world's only blue karaoke zine. I do a little bit of drawing. I have 2 zines that are all just drawings. Dog Tinder 1 and Dog Tinder 2, which I like didn't let myself draw for a really long time because I was like, oh, I'm not good at it. And then I started drawing dogs for fun that I was like walking because I worked as a dog walker. And I was like, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm good at it. It's fun. I'm going to keep doing it. But I mostly focus on writing, to get back to your question. And I think it just comes easier to me than drawing because I get really hung up on like, oh, am I good at drawing? I don't know. Am I good at writing? Hopefully. Will people like connect with what I'm writing? Does that make it good? Yes. And so that's what I try to focus on.
I read this quote the other day. I think it was a meme, and I don't know who it was who said it, but it was a thing about writers, and it's like the best writer isn't the one who uses the biggest, longest words all the time. the best writer is the one who picks the right words to use, right? And to say that you have to use big 7-syllable words for everything as opposed to saying ass, like sometimes the word ass is the right word for what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I like writing a lot, and it's a good it's a good way to just process shit for me. Even if I'm in therapy, it's like, oh, I would like to write this down. And I also really like having like records of things, which is kind of what my live journal zine is. It's handwritten live journal entries. And so it was cool going back into that record, but I've also I've been keeping little journals this year and last year to just keep track of stuff, and I just write in them a little bit every day with like the date on them. Maybe it'll be a zine, maybe it won't. I don't know.
I think you've actually just inspired me, because before we came onto the call today, I was going through a box of stuff because I'm doing this zine that's all in ballpoint pens, different ballpoint pen stuff. And I knew I had some old like little notebooks that I used to kind of journal in like 20 years ago. And I knew I still had them, and I used to doodle in them in ballpoint pens. So I was like, I'll go see if there's anything in there that I can just kind of rip out and use. But I found myself flipping through like, songs I'd written and poems I'd written and lists I'd written of stuff, and to like zap back to that time period, some of it was like, oh crap, but some of it was like, oh my God, I forgot that I felt this way. So, every once in a while I think to myself, oh God, I should really just 10 minutes a day, just write down a little bit about my day in a little journal, just to keep it so that when I'm old and gray and don't remember anything, I'll have it to look back on.
That's what I've been trying to do. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm taking like a 4-week writing class, and one of the prompts last night was like, how do words affect you? And I started writing about how like I used to party a lot and wasn't like reading a lot at the time, but the way words affect me is that they let me travel places that I wouldn't normally get to go to. And so my writing now focuses on kind of regaining memories that I have misplaced or forgotten from my like party 20s or whatever. And so it's cool to like uncover these like hazy memories, I guess, and kind of put myself back in like where I was 10 years ago, where I was 15 years ago.
Yeah. There's so many questions now I have to ask you, but I'm not going to, because but where do I start? What are you reading? What other things are you reading at the moment? As being a writer, you said, actually, even just now, you said when you were partying you weren't reading so much. Now you've come back to reading a lot more. What kind of stuff are you reading?
It's kind of all over the place. I started reading for fun again like 2 years ago. I didn't read a lot I was an English major. I didn't read much in college. Didn't read much after college because I was just so burned out on faking reading, I guess. And so I started reading again for fun. And I've been trying to like keep track of all the books I read. But the book that I read recently that I really love and I've just been telling everyone about is called Tacky by Rax King, and it's a collection of essays on like,
yeah, I know that.
Yeah, I loved it. It really hit home because the author is like around my age, and she wrote about like going to Hot Topic as like a 13-year-old, and Degrassi and the band Creed and just all these things. And I think she wrote about the Olive Garden. And so it's just all these things that I either love or was like ashamed to admit that I love, because they're considered tacky. And it was just all really well written. And that I really liked that. I read it. I think that was like my last book of 2021.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've seen that people talk about that. Just to inspire you both, I keep a journal, a daily journal, and I'm up to book number 10 of it. I started in October 2018,
Oh,
and
wow.
I would write just yeah, like a few minutes every day. I kind of have the same pattern. I just write what I'm reading, what I'm doing for the day, and then just some thoughts about yesterday. And also, oh, the wrong one. I also have like, yeah, I keep a record of what books I've read as well since 2018. It's so cool to look back and go, like, I'll write the date that I finished it. So what's today? Today's January 21st. 21st.
Not yet.
So
Yeah, I was like, wait, what day is it?
this time in 2020, I was reading Killing Commander Tori by Haruki Murakami. So it's cool to look back and go, oh, that's what I was doing on that date, and definitely worth starting or continuing or something like that. Let's move on to the podcast a little bit. Tell us about that. Why?
I like zines, and kind of what Ryan was saying earlier about like I do a lot with the zine community, and so it's like maybe I'll do a good job with this. And so at the end of 2017, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start a podcast. Why not? I hadn't really listened to many podcasts at that point, but I was like determined to just do it. And I am of the mindset that like if I have the resources to create a platform and kind of uplift other voices and like amplify them, then I'm gonna do it. And that's kind of why I got into Zine Fest organizing. But I started it to have fun with it and to just be able to talk to people about zines. I used to record in my like really crappy 1-bedroom apartment in Oakland, and I would just have people come like sit in my living room, huddled around my like little external mic, and just talk to them for an hour. And then I stopped doing it for a while, and then at the beginning of last year, I was like, I'm gonna do it again. And I did a couple episodes and I got really overwhelmed. But it was a lot of fun. And then at the end of last year, so like December, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it again for real. And I started actually putting effort into it and like sourcing guests, and like even though I hate marketing myself, I started like marketing the podcast with my limited budget of $0, and it's been fun. I just talk to people about zines and like what they're working on, kind of like this, but like not video.
It's kind of like we had the idea of Craig and I wanted to do like an interview show to interview zinesters, and we were just chatting about it on Instagram one day, and we were both like, no way, you want to do that too? And we were like, we should do it together, besties forever. And we've never even met in person. It's the funny thing, right? We've been doing this for 2 years. We've never met in person. But it's cool, right? Like it's cool to chat with other zinesters and just like find out how they do it and why they do it and why they want to do it. And some of them think that they're gonna get rich, and some are just like, I like making little mini zines because it's fun and I get to put my stuff on paper and people think it's cool. Like there's no two stories are the same, even though there's some similar paths here and there, but everybody brings something different to the table, which is really cool. Yeah. So with that said, what do you then think is the future of zines?
Future of zines. I think that the youth are getting really into them, which is exciting. I say this because I'm doing a research project on libraries at work, and I looked at some random high school library in like Illinois, and they have a zine. Like the students have a zine. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I wish I had zines when I was in high school. That's great. And so I think, I know people say that zines have never died, but I also know that there's kind of like a resurgence in public knowledge of zines. Yeah, it's kind of like just a constant wave of like, oh, zines are gone. Oh, zines are back. Oh, zines never left. Like a lot of discourse on Twitter, which I hate Twitter discourse. But I think that zines are, I think they're gonna keep going. I think that people are getting into them younger and younger, which is really cool. And maybe they'll go more digital. There's definitely, I think it's definitely easier to incorporate like digital elements in zines now. And a lot of zines are digital only, and just released online, which I think is cool. The youth, I think the youth are the future of zines.
Yeah, I think like you said about the schools, like zines. Yeah, I don't know exactly the history of zines, but like they were, like we all can say that they were all pretty popular in the 80s. So the 80s, 90s. So I'm kind of, I'm 41, 42 tomorrow. So
Happy
I'm
birthday.
kind of at the age of being a teacher. So I think if I was a teacher, I would be going, this is what I used to like when I was young. So I think maybe even some of the teachers are kind of bringing that stuff in a little bit, or we actually know, we've talked to a Zinester who is a teacher who actually does do that. They're into zines, and they kind of bring them into the classroom, and they've introduced some of the collection that they have to the students. So hopefully, yeah, like you say, it's in the youth, it's in the hands of the youth, and see where they take it. Like, I think maybe when the world opens up again or something, Zine Fest happened, basically physical Zine Fest. Maybe the digital, the ones that just make digital might be like, I think I might make a physical one too. I want to be involved in this kind of.
Hopefully.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
I'm gonna show off my zines again.
Please do.
I think, what's that?
Please show them
yeah.
off as much as you can.
Okay. I've got a lot of zines. I'm on Etsy. If people are interested in talking to me about their zines, I would love to talk to them on the podcast. I would love to talk to either or both of you on the podcast. I think that'd be really cool. Like a crossover episode. This is one of my favorite zines I've ever made. It's called Sheryl Crow for the Clinically Depressed. And it's a play on the Handbook for the Recently Deceased from Beetlejuice, but it's about my favorite Sheryl Crow songs. Yeah. Please talk to me about zines, everyone.
Okay,
Somebody's got to.
What is the podcast called? I think we've mentioned the word podcast, but not the name.
It is. I was looking for my stapler. It is called Lngrmstplr. And it's fun. So I have a Lngrmstplr tattoo that I got on I went to Portland Zine Symposium in like 2015 or 2015, I think. But I was just so jazzed on like zines and making zines and meeting zine people and tabling, and so I was like, I'm gonna go get a zine tattoo. So I got a long arm stapler, and later when I was like, oh, what should I call my podcast? I was like, I don't know, like long arm stapler. Sure, okay. And then it kind of stuck, and then I have started kind of making all of my art under that name, just for like, mostly for streamlining purposes, but also it's fun.
Yep.
The tattoo came first.
It's a really recognizable like zine term, right? Like pretty much all zine creators know what a long arm stapler is, and so it's a great moniker to have.
Thanks. Yeah. My friend and I did an art show with this collective in Oakland a couple years ago. We were like, oh, what do we call it? What do we call it? And I was like, is it weird if we just call it Long Arm Stapler? And this is after the podcast started. I was like, brand recognition. Like, just keep it going.
And you say you don't like to do marketing. Come on.
Sometimes.
That's actually kind of the same concept I had kind of between. I like with putting my zine, calling it 5 o'clock in Tokyo. Like it kind of marries the two a little bit of where I am, my handle, my Instagram handle, and it was like I like the name, but also it's kind of just brings the two together. So I completely understand.
I was having lunch with a coworker today, and she was asking me about my Instagram because she wanted to follow it. And so I was like, okay, it's my name is Ryan with underscores all in between, right? And so she's like typing and typing and typing, and she goes, "Why didn't you just call it Pocket Thoughts? That's what this thing is." I'm like, "You're not wrong."
I can't remember what it was before, but I definitely was using a different Instagram handle. And then somebody had already taken just Long Arm Stapler. And so that's why I had to take the vowels out. So it just looks like Lngrmstplr.
No, I think it's cooler without that, though. Like, it looks cooler.
Thank you.
The kids would say it's hip.
As long as it's not mid. I know that's bad. For the kids are saying mid, but it means bad. That's what I learned.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Now I gotta pay attention to my kids, make sure they're not saying mid around me. Dad, this supper's
My
real
son
mid.
speaks Japanese, so he's not gonna say mid, but
Well, amazing.
okay.
I think that's that, eh? We're all out of questions there.
Yeah.
Let's fold your zines up one more time there, Maira. Just for the finale there. So, Maira, anyone who wants to get your zines, is it just Lngrmstplr at etsy.etsy.com?
Yes. I also have like a link tree that has links to my website, my Etsy, a form to be on the podcast, and I have a Patreon that I like rarely use, but if people want to go on that, that's cool too. But it's just Linktree, and then it's Long Arm Stapler with no vowels.
And that's going to be down in the show notes below. So you don't have to type it. You can just click it. It'll be easy for you. It'll be right there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for like just doing what you do and promoting other people's work. It's really great.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you.
Bye, everybody!
We're gonna
I'm coming the frog!